falling object from a height above the ground will have an initial velocity of 0. Kinematic equations allow you to calculate the displacement of the object until it falls. The object falls until it reaches the given velocity or after a given period of time. This is shown by a person falling. The equation below can be used to solve. For example, if it takes 3 seconds for him to fall, then plug in 0 for initial velocity, 3 for time, and negative 10 meters per second for acceleration. And we will get 45 meters for displacement.
Projectile motion is when the object is only acted on by the vertical force of gravity, causing the projectile to accelerate downward. A projectile has no horizontal forces. This can be related to the projectiles of bullets in Fortnite. Using the program Tracker, we can create a position versus time graph of someone running. We can then predict what a velocity versus time graph and an acceleration versus time graph would look like. The instantaneous velocity of an object at a particular time is equal to the slope of the position versus time graph at that time. On the other hand, the average velocity between two times is equal to the slope of the line joining the 2 points on the position versus time graph. In Fortnite, the rocket projectile is accelerating forward. The velocity at time x could be considered the instantaneous velocity as it is at a specific time. The average velocity is the velocity over the entire period that the rocket is being fired.
Forces are the pushes or pulls and the interactions between objects and the motions of objects. This person on the surface is enacting a force on the ramp, and the ramp is enacting the force on the person. Not just in Fortnite, forces are everywhere at all times. Free body diagrams. When analyzing forces, we can create a diagram to represent them, to help us understand them. To create them, you represent the object as a dot, with arrows coming off the dot to represent the forces. The free body diagram for this scenario would appear.
Newton's first law states that an object at rest stays at rest, which is shown by this person staying entirely still and not moving because no force is acted upon them. The law also states that an object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon by an external force, which is shown by the person running until being stopped by the force of the wall. There is a basic difference between mass and weight, because mass is the actual amount of material contained in a body and is measured in kilograms. The Fortnite player here has a mass of 70 kilograms, whereas the weight is the force exerted by gravity on that object, shown by mass times gravity. Note that mass is independent of everything, but weight is different on the Earth or any other planet that may have different gravity. Therefore, the weight force of this player would be 70 kilograms times the force of gravity, which is assumed to be 10 meters per second squared. The hop rocks that are shown here are an example of gravity being changed temporarily, which obviously affects the weight force.
Work is done when a force that is applied to an object moves that object. This force has to be in the direction of motion. The work is calculated by multiplying the force by the amount of movement of an object. This can be seen by a player carrying a minigun lifts the minigun. This will be an applied force upward, also displacing the minigun upwards. Force is in the direction of motion. Let's just say the force was 10 newtons and the distance was 0.5 meters. The work done would be 5 joules. In physics, power is the rate of doing work, the amount of energy transferred per unit of time. To find power, we can simply take the work, which was 5 joules, and divide it by time. If the time was half a second, then the power would be 2.5 watts.
Potential energy is the energy that is stored in an object due to its position relative to some zero position. An object possesses gravitational potential energy if it is positioned at a height above or below the zero height. If this player is standing about 200 meters above the ground, then they are at rest. They contain potential energy, which can be calculated by the formula mgh, which is mass times gravity times height. Kinetic energy is the energy of motion. Any object in motion is using kinetic energy, like a person walking a thrown baseball or a crumb falling from a table. In Fortnite, the potential energy of the person at rest transfers to kinetic when the person falls off of the ceilings.
Oh, I almost landed on your ramp. Good try, Michael. Michael gave me ramp. Okay, Brandon, revive me.
Momentum is mass in motion, and any moving object can have momentum. An object's change in momentum is equal to its impulse. Impulse is a quantity of force times the time interval. There's something in Fortnite called impulse grenades, which keeps the mass the same, but dramatically changes the velocity, therefore the momentum, therefore it creates an impulse. The most simple case of a collision is a one-dimensional collision or a head-on collision. This is where two objects collide only in the x direction or only in the y direction. The momentum before will always equal the momentum after. This, in Fortnite, can be connected to a head-on collision with a player and a sticky grenade. Momentum is conserved before and after the sticky grenade collides with the person. Two-dimensional collisions occur when two objects collide and they end up glancing off each other in different directions, both the x and y directions. Momentum is still conserved, although it is conserved in each direction independently. In Fortnite, when a grenade is thrown at a person, they collide and the grenade bounces off in both the x and y direction. An increase or decrease in the frequency of sound, light, or other waves as the source and observer move toward or away from each other is the Doppler effect. This explains the change in pitch that you just heard as the player is moving away from the battle bus.
Here.
In sound waves, energy is transferred through vibration of air particles or particles of a solid through which the sound travels. This emission of energy through sound waves is seen in the C4 explosions in Fortnite. The explosion releases a loud sound which is emitted from the bomb in the form of a shockwave through the air particles.
Transverse waves have motion perpendicular to the direction of motion. The waves go up and down. This can be seen in the streams in Fortnite, where actual waves in the water travel perpendicular to the direction of motion. This motion is modeled by the diagram, which is perfectly mirrored in the wave motion of the water. Types of waves: longitudinal, transversal. There are two basic types of wave motion for mechanical waves: longitudinal waves and transverse waves. Longitudinal waves are seen in the areas of Fortnite, as Fortnite depends greatly on sound waves, as seen everywhere in explosions, bullet sounds, and even footsteps sounds. Transverse waves are seen in water, which is seen in streams all across the Fortnite map.